1. The assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse, a tragedy at dawn, and an international criminal network. In the early hours of July 2021, a group of heavily armed mercenaries suddenly broke into the private residence of President Jovenel Moïse in the affluent neighborhood of Pelerin Fief in the capital, Port-au-Prince. In the chaos of the night, the gunmen stormed upstairs, opened fire repeatedly, and shot President Moïse dead right in his bedroom. His wife, First Lady Martine Moïse, was seriously injured, but miraculously survived after being flown to the United States for treatment. The attackers identified themselves as U.S. anti-narcotics agents, speaking both English and Spanish, which initially led the Presidential Security Detail to believe it was an official operation. Only when the gunfire intensified did they realize this was an organized assassination. The president was struck by 12 bullets, his body riddled with wounds and fractures. Immediately afterward, the Haitian government published a list of dozens of suspects, most of whom were mercenaries from Colombia who had previously served in professional military forces. Several Haitian nationals were also arrested on charges of assisting the attackers by providing logistics and intelligence. In the days that followed, Haitian police launched an urgent manhunt, apprehending many individuals involved. However, some masterminds are believed to have fled the country or remain in hiding. The true motive behind the assassination has yet to be fully clarified. Many theories suggest the attack arose from fierce power struggles within Haiti, where President Moïse faced accusations of corruption, ruling by decree, and delaying elections. Some sources emphasize the possibility that international financial crime networks and drug trafficking interests wanted to eliminate him to protect their stakes. Following the president's death, Haiti descended into severe political turmoil. Numerous factions vied for control, while organized crime grew more rampant. The assassination also raised a host of major questions. Who funded the operation to kill the president? Why was presidential security almost completely neutralized? And what international conspiracies might have stood behind this bloody tragedy? Although many suspects have been arrested, to this day the investigation has yet to uncover the final answers. The assassination of Jovenel Moïse has become one of the most complex and shocking political crimes in the Caribbean in the 21st century. 2. The mysterious death of President Idriss Déby, when the battlefield and the political arena became one. On April 20th, 2021, a spokesperson for Chad's military announced that President Idriss Déby had died from fatal wounds sustained while personally commanding an offensive against the rebel group Front for Change and Concord in Chad, FACT, in the country's north. The news immediately shocked international public opinion, as Déby was one of Africa's longest-serving leaders, having been in power for over 30 years since 1990. According to the official account, while leading troops on the front line, the president was hit by gunfire during fierce clashes. However, numerous independent sources and international analysts raised serious questions. Why would a head of state, who had just been reelected to a sixth term only one day earlier, risk his life by going to the battlefield amid such fragile security? And was this truly just a combat accident, or a carefully staged cover for an assassination designed to shift the balance of power? To many Chadians, Idriss Déby was a deeply polarizing figure. In the eyes of his supporters, he was a strong leader who maintained stability and prevented extremist groups like Boko Haram from spreading. But to the opposition and numerous human rights organizations, he was the embodiment of a prolonged dictatorship marked by the suppression of political freedoms and entrenched corruption. Rebel groups like FACT had long sought to overthrow him, arguing that his power was sustained only by violence and electoral fraud. Immediately after the president's death, a transitional military council led by Muhammad Idriss Déby, his son, swiftly took control. The council declared it would govern the country for 18 months before holding elections, but this move was fiercely condemned by the opposition, which denounced it as a disguised military coup. Protests erupted across multiple cities, raising fears that the nation would sink deeper into instability. To this day, the true cause of Idriss Déby's death remains a matter of controversy. Some experts believe he may have been assassinated by traitors within the military or rival factions in the government itself. Others argue he truly fell in fierce combat, a death that reflects the fragility of power built on decades of militarism and violence. Either way, the incident has opened a new and uncertain chapter for Chad, a country whose modern history has been inseparable from Idris Déby's name for both war and stability. 3. The assassination attempt on President Nicolás Maduro when bomb-laden drones struck the military parade. On the afternoon of August 4th, 2008, the atmosphere on Bolívar Avenue in the Venezuelan capital Caracas was tense but solemn. President Nicolás Maduro, along with senior military generals, stood on a high platform observing the parade marking the 81st anniversary of the National Guard's founding. Hundreds of soldiers lined up in formation while the Venezuelan flag fluttered against the sky. Just as Maduro began his speech, sudden, deafening explosions rang out, shaking the entire area. Live broadcast footage captured the moment when the parade troops, standing at attention, abruptly broke ranks and fled in panic. Spectators ducked to the ground in fear of gunfire, while the president's security detail swiftly formed a human shield and escorted him off the stage. According to the official statement later, two DJI M600 drones carrying C4 explosives had been remotely detonated. One exploded near the grandstand, the other crashed into a nearby building and self-destructed. The blast fragments and shockwave injured at least 7 soldiers. However, President Maduro was unharmed. He appeared on national television just hours after the attack, declaring he was safe. The Venezuelan government immediately accused far-right factions and exiled opposition groups of orchestrating the assassination plot, while blaming Colombia and the United States for financing it. President Maduro proclaimed, "They tried to kill me, but the invisible shield of the people and God protected me." In the days that followed, Venezuelan security forces arrested more than 20 suspects, including several soldiers accused of betrayal and opposition activists alleged to be involved. State media repeatedly aired images of the destroyed drones and confessions from some of those detained. Yet, despite the sweeping propaganda campaign, the international public remained skeptical. Some human rights organizations and observers argued that the incident could be exploited by the Maduro government to tighten political repression and detain opposition leaders. This was considered one of the rare instances worldwide where explosive drones were openly used to attempt the assassination of a head of state in the middle of a major event. The attack marked a new turning point in modern political security, where inexpensive civilian technology could be transformed into weapons threatening the most powerful leaders. To this day, the identities and true roles of all those behind the plot remain a subject of controversy. For the Venezuelan government, it stands as proof that enemies are conspiring to sabotage the Bolivarian revolution. For the skeptics, this unprecedented assassination attempt has only deepened the shadows of mystery surrounding Venezuela's political life. 4. The assassination of Serbian Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić, the sniper's bullet that ended reform hopes. At noon on March 12, 2003, Serbian Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić stepped out of his car to enter the government headquarters in central Belgrade. He had just attended an important meeting on plans for economic reform and a crackdown on organized crime, causes he had spent years fighting for. As Đinđić approached the steps, a sniper shot rang out, shattering the quiet. The bullet pierced his chest, destroying his spine and aorta. Within minutes, the 50-year-old prime minister died at the hospital. Đinđić's death immediately shocked Serbia and all of Europe. He was the emblematic figure of the post-Balkan War generation of politicians, willing to confront the brutal legacy of Slobodan Milosevic's regime, a man who had been charged with war crimes. In 2001, it was Zoran Đinđić himself who ordered Milosevic's arrest and transfer to the International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague, despite repeated death threats from extremist groups and mafia factions loyal to the old regime. According to the investigation, the killer was Zvezdan Jovanović, a former commander of the elite Red Berets Special Forces Unit. From an apartment opposite the government building, he had planned the assassination meticulously for weeks and carried it out with a sniper rifle. His motive was clear: revenge for Đinđić's extradition of Milosevic to the international court and his relentless campaign to dismantle the criminal networks that had dominated Serbia throughout the 1990s. After the assassination, the Serbian government declared a state of emergency and launched a massive operation called Sabre, arresting hundreds of mafia members and paramilitary gang affiliates. It was the largest crackdown on crime in Serbia since the breakup of Yugoslavia. For many, Zoran Đinđić symbolized the hope that Serbia could finally break free from its violent past and join the European community. He was firmly committed to market economic reforms, strengthening international cooperation, and bringing criminals to justice, even in the face of fierce hatred from entrenched interests. The assassination not only killed a man, but also dealt a heavy blow to Serbia's fragile process of democratization. Though the perpetrator was eventually captured and sentenced to a long prison term, the leadership vacuum and deep political polarization continued to haunt the country for years. To this day, March 12th is commemorated annually as a tragic moment when a sniper's bullet stole the chance for renewal that Zoran Đinđić had so passionately worked to nurture for Serbia. 5. The assassination attempt on President Erdoğan, the bloody coup that almost changed Turkey. On the night of July 15th and into the early hours of July 16th, 2016, Turkey was shaken by a daring military coup led by a group of senior officers. Their goal: overthrow President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan and the government of the Justice and Development Party, AKP. At that time, President Erdoğan was staying at the Grand Yazıcı Hotel in the coastal city of Marmaris. Acting on early intelligence, a commando team from the Army Special Forces Command, led by Lieutenant Colonel Gökhan Sönmez, was ordered to deploy to Marmaris by helicopter to capture or kill him. Around 30 Special Forces operatives attacked the hotel in the early morning hours of July 16th. However, thanks to advance warning, Erdoğan and his entourage had left the hotel just minutes before the commandos arrived. When the coup forces stormed the premises, they opened heavy fire and clashed with the remaining presidential guards. 2 of Erdoğan's bodyguards were killed and many were wounded. The failed assault became a decisive moment that allowed Erdoğan to survive and quickly mount a counteroffensive. Meanwhile, in Ankara and Istanbul, tanks seized airports, bridges, the parliament building, and the national broadcaster TRT. The coup leaders, including General Akın Öztürk, the former Air Force commander, later considered the central figure, declared the establishment of a peace council to govern the country. However, Erdogan appeared live via FaceTime, urging citizens to take to the streets to defend the government. Tens of thousands responded, pouring into squares to confront tanks and rebel soldiers. The battle for control raged through the night. Rebel F-16 fighter jets bombed the parliament, intelligence headquarters, and the presidential complex. In response, loyalist aircraft struck coup positions. The chaos left over 250 people dead and more than 2,000 wounded. By the morning of July 16th, the coup had completely collapsed. More than 10,000 military personnel were arrested, including many high-ranking officers such as General Akın Öztürk, accused of masterminding the plot, Lieutenant Colonel Gökhan Sönmez, commander of the team that attacked Erdoğan's hotel, Colonel Muharrem Kosa, suspected of orchestrating the overall plan. President Erdogan accused cleric Fethullah Gulen, living in exile in the United States, of being behind the coup attempt, though Gulen denied involvement. The government then launched a massive purge targeting the military, judiciary, police, education, and media. Nearly 100,000 public employees were dismissed or detained, turning the failed coup into a watershed moment that consolidated Erdogan's power more than ever before. The assassination attempt in Marmaris remains a chilling example of how the Turkish president's life came within minutes of ending, and a stark reminder of how fragile power can be even in the 21st century. 6. The assassination of President Park Chung-hee, South Korea, 1979. On the evening of October 26, 1979, in a private dining room of the Blue House, the South Korean presidential residence, a tense dinner was underway between President Park Chung-hee and a group of generals and bodyguards. Park, who had led the country for 18 years, was regarded as the man who transformed South Korea from poverty into an industrial miracle. But he was also fiercely criticized as an iron-fisted dictator who brutally suppressed democratic movements. Seated at the same table that night was Kim Jae-gyu, the director of the Korean Central Intelligence Agency, KCIA, as well as Park's close friend and trusted subordinate for decades. Also present was Cha Ji-chul, the head of the Presidential Security Service, who wielded enormous power and was utterly trusted by Park. The atmosphere grew increasingly strained as Park and Cha criticized Kim for allowing widespread protests to escalate. In the weeks prior, anti-dictatorship demonstrations had erupted across the country, culminating in a massive strike in Busan and Masan. Park ordered the KCIA to crush the movement, while Cha Ji-chul dismissed Kim as incompetent. Cornered and humiliated, Kim Jae-gyu began harboring extreme intentions. At about 7:40 p.m., as the dinner neared its end, Kim left the room and returned with a Walther PPK pistol hidden in his jacket pocket. In a moment of sudden violence, he drew the gun and shot Cha Ji-chul point blank. Then, he turned and fired 2 shots at Park Chung-hee at close range. The president collapsed instantly, blood spreading across the table. In that instant, nearly 2 decades of rule ended with an assassination carried out by his own trusted aide. Kim Jae-gyu was arrested that same night. In his testimony, he claimed the killing was in the national interest to end dictatorship and pave the way for democracy. However, the court did not accept his political motive. Kim was executed by hanging in May 1980. Park Chung-hee's death plunged South Korea into prolonged political turmoil. Just a few months later, another military coup erupted, bringing General Chun Do-hwan to power. The assassination became a fateful turning point, closing an era of rapid growth and opening a new struggle for democracy. 7. The assassination attempts on President Gerald Ford, USA 1970. In 1990, U.S. President Gerald Ford faced not just one, but two assassination attempts within less than a month. An unprecedented occurrence in American history. On September 5, 1970, Ford traveled to Sacramento, California to meet the public. As he was walking among the crowd in Capitol Park, Lynette Squeaky From, a young woman with striking red hair, managed to get close to him. From was a member of the Manson family, the notorious cult led by criminal Charles Manson. She pulled out a Colt 45 pistol and pointed it directly at Ford. Only because the safety mechanism hadn't been disengaged, the gun jammed and did not fire. Secret Service agents rushed in and subdued From before she could pull the trigger again. She was arrested on the spot and later sentenced to life in prison. Less than 3 weeks later, on September 22nd, as Ford visited San Francisco, a second assassination attempt unfolded. Sarah Jane Moore, an accountant and radical political activist, blended into the crowd across from the St. Francis Hotel. When the president appeared, Moore drew a .38 revolver and fired a shot from about 40 feet, 12 meters away. The bullet narrowly missed Ford's head and struck the wall behind him. A former Marine named Oliver Sipple, standing nearby, managed to grab her arm before she could fire a second shot, saving the president's life. Moore stated that she wanted to change an unjust society and saw assassinating a leader as a way to draw attention. She was also sentenced to life imprisonment. After many years of rehabilitation, Moore was released in 2007. The two back-to-back assassination attempts shocked the American public and forced the Secret Service to tighten security around public events. Gerald Ford, though he survived, later said he would never forget the look in the eyes of those who tried to kill me in broad daylight.